Hello, everyone. We're just going to wait for maybe a couple more minutes until people come in. For those of you in Hong Kong, I think some people are joining outside of Hong Kong, but for those in Hong Kong, you might be enjoying kind of a indoors night today, staying dry from the typhoon. Hope the weather is better for those who are not in Hong Kong.
In Israel, it's very hot.
Oh, it's very hot. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm assuming not raining.
No, not at all. Pretty much never.
Okay.
Pretty much never. Wow.
I'm actually living in the south of Israel, and we usually have very high temperatures, so no, not much rain here.
I see. Well, welcome from Israel. It's always nice to see who comes in, and I know we have a global reach, and people know about us outside of Asia even. So welcome from Israel. Okay. So let's wait. Should we wait just a few more seconds? Until it becomes 2 minutes past and we can start.
Yeah, we had 46 people registered for this webinar, but I was saying that the typhoon may impact on people's plans to attend if they're based in Hong Kong.
Yeah, maybe just as housekeeping throughout the presentation, feel free to, so everyone will be muted, but feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. Alternatively, you can also chat in anytime. And I know Tony's making this presentation quite interactive, so there will be polling activities and some chat activities. So stay tuned, and please engage whenever. So Tony, let's start. Yes?
Okay. All right. So talking about interaction.
So yes. So welcome everyone first, and I know. So there's some people from Hong Kong, some people outside of Hong Kong. Welcome from wherever you're dialing in. So today's is a webinar that we have, which is a part of a series of webinars that we've been providing throughout the whole year on coaching topics. And so a lot of you know about Transcend. We provide leadership and organizational development programs, but also coach training programs, professional coach training programs. And here's our mission here. We help individuals and organizations adapt and optimize in the face of increasing pressure, stress, and overwhelm that is caused usually by this profound changes that is happening in the world on multiple levels and in many different forms. We have crafted this mission statement even before the world that we're living in right now. So this is something that we have been, a context that we've been working with throughout the years. So Tony, if you can go back to the interaction slide, if possible. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we're gonna make this presentation as interactive as possible. So we have this platform called MENTIMETER. So using your phone, please log on to this, and we'll chat the link in, and also when you log into this website, please enter this code, and you'll get instructions then, and Tony will prompt some of the interactions throughout the presentation. Okay, Tony. Can we? Yes, wonderful. So for those of you who know Transcend, thank you for staying in touch. For those who don't know Transcend, once again, we specialize in two main areas. One is professional coach training. So for people who want to become coaches or continue developing their skills as a professional and executive coach, we run several programs which are mostly online at this point. So please contact us if you're curious about that. The other big thing that we do is we service corporates and organizations who are looking for skills trainings that is in the area of coaching, leadership, organizational development, but also we provide executive coaching services to organizations as well. We'd love to talk to you, and what you'll experience today is something that we provide in our services and products. So if it piqued your curiosity and want to know more, please message us at this email, partnerships@transcendinternational.com. Okay. So with us today, who will be presenting on well-formed values and its impact in our lives, whether it's personal lives and professional lives, and how it can help us flourish. Tony DICKEL, who is the CEO of Transcend International, a very experienced global executive coach here, who's had many years of also experience in leadership in a corporate setting as well. I know Tony has also a mindfulness and psychotherapy background and practice. And these are some things that we also integrate in our work in Transcend International. And I'm sure he'll be covering this in his presentation. So Tony, I'll hand to you, and let's go for it. You're muted.
Off, did you? Let me see. How do I?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm unmuted now, aren't I?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, that's great. So, well, thank you all for being here. I noticed that I recognize quite a few people here who, a few coaches, a couple of team coaches, and many people on this call, of course, are people that are close to us. So thank you for all being here. And this topic tonight, which of course we cover in our coach training programs, is a topic that is dear to my heart personally. And it is a topic that we put quite some focus on at Transcend. And the reason why we do that is because a proper sort of understanding and embodiment of values can lead to wonderful places for us in the context of our well-being and also of our professional success. And I'm sure that you've all heard about and used the word values frequently in your life. Maybe some of you have sometimes said or heard other people said, oh, you know, I really don't like this. It goes against my values. And this is a very, very common usage. And it could be often said with a sense of indignation or emotional agitation. So there are lots and lots of definitions of values, and none of them are wrong. But depending upon how we see values, we may or may not be able to use them to help us to move towards the direction of success and happiness. So tonight we're going to show you a way of looking at values that might be useful to be able to see this kind of much misunderstood expression. And what we're going to do, if I can get it going, is we're going to start with a poll. All right. Now, very simple. It's a question. There are 14 frogs sitting on a log. 3 decided to jump in. How many remain? Okay, so there's a few possible answers, I guess, that you might come up with. And I've launched the poll. Just chuck into the poll what you think is the answer to this question. There are 14 frogs sitting on the log. 3 decided to jump in. How many remain? Everybody, including the hosts and the co-hosts, can have a go at answering this question. Okay, so can you see the poll? Anybody?
No.
You can't. Okay, well, in theory, I have launched the poll, and it says, I've got a message here which says end poll. Hands up if anybody, let me see. Dariana, maybe you don't mind sharing whether you can see the poll here.
Yeah, I shared it already. Yes, yeah, I can see it.
So would you like to enter some data into the poll? Because if you enter data, then I can see it coming up. So I think what happens is that hosts and co-hosts can't see it. Have you put something in, Dariana?
Yes, I did. And someone else did as well. I see in the chat.
Beautiful. Well, I'm not seeing any results. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to ask you to instead to put the answer into the chat window. So what are some of your answers? So we've got, what have we got? 14, Michelle reckons, Frederick reckons 14. What does anybody else say? Any other answers? So we've only had 2 answers so far. It's not, in theory, it's not that difficult a question. So maybe a few more people can at least have a try. Don't be shy. Yes?
If you want, I can see on my screen that I can see the results of the poll. 40% of the people answered 14, 20% of the people answered 11, 30% of the people say that they don't know, and 10% that it's unknowable.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I can't see that. Would you believe that? I can see what I can see is that nobody has actually shared any information. So God knows what's happened there. All right, so we've got a whole number of different answers. And the answer, of course, is that we actually don't know. Because whilst 14 frogs may be sitting on the log and 3 decided to jump in, it actually doesn't actually tell us how many did jump in to the pond. And so it's not necessarily useful. So what I'm going to do now is maybe just let's get a discussion going in groups around what it is that you think values are. So I'm going to set you up into a kind of randomized groups of how many people have we got in here? We've got about 15 people. So I'm going to make 5 groups of 3. And I'd like you to have a discussion, all right, on this topic. Actually, let's do that again. All right, so the topic is this. So how would you define the word value? As far as you're concerned, what does the word value mean to you? I'm going to give you maybe 5 minutes, just have a chat with each other about this question. Okay, ready for that? Let's go.
I mean, it's interesting that corporate values was where human potential really got some traction early on, and went away from it later. So I'm interested you've brought it up again.
Well, we'll see. We'll see whether there's any alignment between your definitions of values and the way that we would see it. And we're not really talking so much about corporate values here. We're looking at values at the individual level.
Fair point.
And how they might align. But that's what we're discussing today, I think. All right. So I think people are I think people are back. All right. So what came up from your groups in terms of what values meant for you? So who would like to start? Cyril, I heard a robust conversation going in your group before I left it, Cyril, I think. What did you...
Oh, okay. My partner, Dorian, she nicely captured our discussions. So Dorian, do you want to share?
As you prefer. Yeah, we had a few seconds to make a recap. So we said that values are, for us, guiding principles that we hold very dear, and they guide us in choices in life, something that we rely on, aspirations, things that not always they might be, I'm not saying right or wrong, but good for ourselves as an individual, but just because we believe in, and this is what we grew up with, right, then we pursue it in life.
Okay. Lovely. So it sounds like something about guiding choices for your life. Lovely. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Breakout 5. That's Frederic.
Oh, hi.
What happened in your group?
Good to see you,
Hi.
Sonny.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah, we were with Jennifer and Ian, who shared on the chat. Right. And I think, yeah, definitely we're saying this is kind of our foundations and the fundamentals that can guide us through our life and make sure that, in a way, our intuition is based on something really strong that, like, you don't need to think because you are so aligned and linked to our values. Right. And I don't know why I had that vision of also, I was saying to Jennifer that for me, it's like also a stick, like there are 2 ends, and on one side, on one end, there is the foundation, and on the other end, there is, well, that was my vision. There is the kind of where we want to go to. So it's kind of inspiration as well. So that gives the movement. So it's kind of
Would everybody like to mute their microphone if they're not speaking, please? There's a little bit of noise coming in the background there. All right.
It was the idea of giving the kickoff as well as, you know, giving the movement to go towards something. And
right.
of course, linked to, yeah, as I was saying, religion, work, or family. So
beautiful. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And all right, so let's just move on, because otherwise we'll be here all night getting sharing. But what I've heard so far from the groups was values are really, they're like a compass for life. And here are a bunch of words that are often quoted by people as values. This actually comes from the work of Stephen Hayes, who was the founder of a method of psychotherapy called acceptance commitment therapy, which is highly values centric. And here's a few words that he and his team kind of came out with in terms of the words that people say when asked what their values actually are. And what I'd like you to do is have a look at this. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you the question. I'm going to actually ask you to input into MENTIMETER your up to 5 of your most important values. Now, this is experimental technology. We're playing around a little bit here. So if it doesn't work, we're just going to revert to the chat window. Okay. So have a look at this just for a couple of minutes. And now what I'd like you to do is to go here. Oh, and here they come. Input up to
Please
5.
share your screen, Tony.
I'm sorry?
We can't
You want me
see
to
that.
share my screen? Ah, okay. That's a very good thing if I do that. So just hold on 1 second. And thank you for reminding me, because when I come out of the breakout rooms, often my screen may not be shared. So here comes some things coming into the values. We've got, can you see my screen now, Dariana?
Yes.
Yes, good. So we're seeing listening, we're seeing integrity. Some people have put authenticity. And the way that this works is the more people put these words in, the bigger the word becomes. So that's, if you're not familiar, how these things actually work. Serving others, family, authenticity, compassion is coming up on the inside rail as a leader now. We've also got diversity, positivity, respect. That's an interesting one. We'll talk a little bit about respect in a minute. Fairness is coming in, empathy, joy. Now just leave it for just another couple of minutes, another few seconds, just to see if there's anything else coming in. So you can put other words in. I think you can put up to 5 important words in there. So I'm going to, 15 seconds, we're going to close this. And I think it's interesting that people are putting in words like family and respect and openness, freedom. Wonderful. Okay. All right. So thank you for sharing that. And by the way, I'll just go back there. If anybody wants to take a screenshot of this for their posterity, this is from this very group, in terms of what this group are saying are things that they value. Okay, so just in case you want to do that. All right, so let's have a look at some definition of values in terms of the way that some people describe them. Some people would say that they are qualities of mind or character which a person can use as a yardstick to measure behaviors. And the interesting thing about that is that they're qualities of mind or character that people use as a yardstick, but the idea with it is that it's kind of running at the subconscious level. We use it as a yardstick to measure our behavior, and we feel good or bad about a behavior. But sometimes we might not be able to articulate easily why we feel good or bad about that particular behavior or about somebody else's behavior. So that's one. Another one is principles or standards which drive behavior, one's judgment of what is important in life. And in a minute, we're going to talk about how sometimes the things that drive behavior may not be actually related to our values. There may be other things that may be less useful to us. Another one is an individual's assessment, perhaps, of what they really care about. So that would be a lovely way of describing values. So all of these things we would say are, relatively skillful ways of defining values. And we have a definition of values that we also think is particularly useful in the context of how it can work in terms of coaching and developing people. And it sort of looks like this: a way that one aspires to show up in an important role or context of one's life. A way that one aspires to show up in an important role or context of one's life. So has anybody got anything to say about that? Would anybody like to comment on that definition? Who thinks it's rubbish? Who thinks it could potentially be a useful definition? Who thinks anything about this that they would like to say? No?
I like it because it says
Who's speaking? So please mention your name.
Okay, I'm Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer. Yeah.
Yes. So I like the word aspires because to me it implies sometimes we may fall short of our values and be hypocrites sometimes, but we try our best to show up and work towards it. I think it's a work in process kind of thing. Like yeah.
I think it's interesting that you used the word hypocrite, because I think personally we would say that it is good to aspire to show up in a certain way in one's life, and it's also good to know that we're human beings and it's unlikely to happen. So the ways that we would love to show up in our lives, for various reasons, from time to time, we're going to suffer from what we tend to call leakage, where a value that we aspire to may or may not be alive within us at a particular time. And hopefully what we're going to talk about tonight is what might cause leakage and how we might be able to deal with it when it happens, so that we can show up more in line with the way that we would like to, right? So a few things about values is that values can either be known or they may not be known by a person. And if a person does not know, or has not, if you wish, either A, discovered, or B, created their values or their awareness of their values, then they don't have a compass, and they're going to be driven instead by what we call the momentary, day by day or moment by moment autopilot. And the autopilot is really what we call the autopilot is really a set of self-protective drivers of behavior that really are designed kind of to keep us safe moment by moment as we go through our lives, right? So it's what the mind might be screaming at us that might be valuable to us in what we call a moment of choice, which is a moment where we need to actually do something which is in line with something we care about, or we're likely to do something else instead, right? And by the way, of course, as it says on this slide, this can happen even when our values are known to us. Even if we do think that we've got a pretty clear idea of what our values are, we may just not be attending to them in that moment of choice, and we may be attending instead to something else. We call them drivers, you know? So if known, values can provide the highway, which can lead us to goals and outcomes that we would like to have in our lives. You know, so we talk about that they are capable of being our compass, our beacon, and to use a sailing metaphor, our keel, you know, that keeps us steady in difficult times, right? And if we go off of that highway that leads to our goals, then we can become lost, okay? However, when our values are, number one, known, and number two, embodied or lived, then they can have a profound impact on our happiness and also our success, okay? Oh, and look at that, that's just popped in up at the top. My animations have gone weird. And as I said earlier on, they're often not known to us. We often haven't done the work that we might need to do, you know, in order to discover our values. All right, so there's that. All right, carrying on with sort of some useful differentiators between values and maybe other things that you'll have heard of that we may have or may have us. Values are, as we see it, values are not goals, okay? Values are ways of living that provide a sense of meaning and purpose in and of themselves, right? The idea is that they're not necessarily serving other values. They are elemental. So for example, you know, we might hold goals, and our values may lead us in the direction of our goals. But the idea is that values are a bit more fundamental. They're not, if you wish, made to serve goals. Our values are already here. Our goals are best aligned to what it is that we may have forgotten about ourselves and the things that we care about. So a story on that is I was counseling actually somebody recently who had spent 3 years studying an MBA. And she was attending very, very carefully to this MBA. She was getting up in the morning. She was highly motivated, going in, studying for her MBA, because she had that goal to get that MBA. And that goal was captivating her attention day by day and driving her down the path. Okay. But the problem is that when she graduated, when she got the MBA, she realized that the whole of the 2.5 years that she spent on it was a distraction. She couldn't connect the MBA and the whole process of getting the MBA to anything that was actually meaningful for her. And that's why she was coming to counseling, because, she got the goal, she got the MBA, and suddenly she had no compass any longer to direct her attention. She lost a sense of meaning. And that was actually quite troubling. So the challenge there is that whilst goals can direct attention, okay, we know that goals do help us to direct attention, but values are those things that help us to direct our attention to the right thing. So those things and maybe those goals, which actually can create a sense of happiness for us. So they're not goals, all right? That's the first thing. So the second thing is that they're not objects. So an object is something that you have, right? So like family is something that, well, we don't possess family, but we all have a family. Health is something that we have. And many of us, when asked what our values are, will say words like this that actually point more to, if you wish, nouns or objects or things that we have than to values themselves. And if we see our values in this way, there's not necessarily anything wrong with it. It can just lead us to emotional agitation later on. Okay, so there's that. Values are also not outcomes. Okay, so the pursuit outcomes are, one way of looking at this is to say that outcomes are, if you wish, things that are in the future, except that at the moment that we have achieved an outcome, then they're already in the past, if that makes sense. So outcomes are in the future until we've achieved them, and then they immediately flip into being in the past. Values, on the other hand, are ways of living. They are enduring guides to living. They cannot be achieved, but they can be manifest through us taking committed action, which is in line with those values. So there's that. And so you could say that values are a little bit more like mental attitudes or mental strategies that can give meaning to life. Okay, for example, get a law degree because we would like to help people with their legal issues. Maybe a durable goal that is in line with the value, but we do need to be careful of the underlying reason why we're pursuing a goal. Why is it important to us? Because otherwise, sometimes when we achieve those goals, they then come back to kick us in the bum, and they may not be necessarily meaningful. So there's something on that. Yeah. Any comment on any of that from anybody? Please, just if you want to say something, just open up your mic, because I can't see your hands up or down or whatever, because I don't have access for some reason to the participant list. So if you'd like to say something, anybody, including panelists, please do go ahead and speak. Otherwise, forever hold your peace on this piece as we move into the difference between values and drivers. And perhaps, there's a beautiful picture here of a double-edged sword, because sometimes values are like a double-edged sword. And maybe this can be a little bit confusing and hopefully interesting at the same time. So a driver could be defined as, well, what do you think? Anything that drives our behavior in a moment of choice. That's how we would define a driver. Now, wouldn't it be lovely if our drivers are always related to the things that we care most about, the things that we aspire to doing, thinking and feeling as we go through our lives? Wouldn't it be lovely if all of the time we could hold in our attention that which is really important to us, the way that we would like to show up in our lives, context by context? But sadly, that doesn't happen. And whilst all values can be drivers, if only we can remember them in the moment of choice, of course, not all drivers are values as we would define it. that we would regard as a useful definition of value. So the question is, what is it that's, and I don't need you to answer this question right here, unless you would like to, but it's good to ask yourself this question again and again, moment by moment. What is driving you in the moment of choice? You know, are you actually being driven? Is your behavior actually being informed by a value, something that you care about, a way that you would like to show up in that particular context? Or is there something else that is informing your behavior in that moment? And do you even know? Because as Richie Davidson said a few years ago, somewhere between 98 and 99.9% of the time, everything that we do, think, and feel is completely automatic relative to the context. And we are not aware of what it is that is informing our behavior in a particular moment. And if we're not aware of what's informing our behavior in a particular moment, then by definition, we're not going to know if that thing that's driving our behavior is actually the most important thing for us in that moment. So what is it that you would like to be driving you in those key moments of choice that may be defining whether you're going in a certain direction or another direction, or whether you even know? So let's just do a little bit more on drivers, because see what some of these actually look like. All right. So drivers are patterns of thinking and feeling that create impulses. And then when they create impulses, they motivate either us to do something or not do something in a particular moment. So a driver is something that informs an impulse to act or not act in a particular moment of choice. Okay. And we'll talk about what some of these things are in a moment. And they're often self-protective, in that these drivers are storylines often that we're running, and they may be goals that we don't have. Right? So what do I mean by a goal that we don't have? Any ideas on that? Anyone like to offer, be brave and open up their mic and tell me what I mean by a goal that we don't have? Dariana.
Hi. It's something we discussed actually in the breakout room before.
Ah.
I made the example that, you know, sometimes one of the value is the family. So you think you need to get married, or as, I don't know, a job 9 to 5, for example, but this doesn't necessarily have to work for us as an individual. So, I mean,
okay, so
it's a fake news in a way.
It could be fake news, right? The way that's lovely. So thank you for sharing that, Dariana. The way that we would look at a goal that we don't have, and the reason why we say it's a goal that we don't have, is because it's more likely a goal that has us rather than a goal that we have. So it's a subconscious pattern of demand that is being placed upon us by our mind, which moment by moment is making a prediction of how we're going to feel if certain things happen. And it's taking data in from the present moment all the time, and it's chucking it out into the future to make a prediction of how we're going to feel about what is happening in the moment. Are we going to be, is this going to improve my chances of being happy, surviving and thriving, or is it going to reduce my chances of being happy, surviving and thriving? And depending upon the result of that prediction, it creates an impulse. Now, of course, the reference point for making that prediction about what's going to happen with this present moment information that's coming in, the reference point for that, of course, is in the past. So you could say that we're going most of us are spending all of our time going into the past to make a prediction into the future about what this moment means to me. None of which is useful often, because the past information is unreliable. The future prediction is based on unreliable data, because the stories that we're telling ourselves about what we must have in our lives in order to be happy are often based on internal fake news. There are only a few things that we actually must have in our lives in order to be content and happy, and most of the rest of it is kind of made up by our wonderful cognitive mind. So this is all designed, of course, to keep us alive, but often it is creating fake news that we react to. Okay, and that stuff, when that is happening on the autopilot without awareness, is rarely related to the things that actually we really do care about in the long term. If we were to just kind of step back from this process of automatic prediction, we would notice often we take a pause and we would say, oh, my mind is screaming at me that I need to do this, but actually, you know what? This will take me away from that which I really care about. So it's really worth stopping and challenging. And this is related to, as I said just now, the mind-made musts, the mind-made stories of what we must have in our life in order to survive and thrive. And here's a few examples of them. I wonder how many of you recognize, or they wouldn't be any of you because otherwise you wouldn't be here. But I'm wondering how many of you know somebody that has these as primary drivers. I must never look stupid, because if I look stupid, then there's going to be some big, bad, hairy, dark outcome. And therefore, I need to protect myself from ever looking stupid by ... And this is what we call the coping strategy that causes us to behave in ways that are often not useful to us, related to the stories, the assumptions and beliefs that are holding us hostage, the fake news that is holding us hostage and preventing us from behaving in a way that is useful relative to what we really care about. So others that you might are very, very common. There's one here which is looking like a value, right? So how many people have as one of their top 5 values the need to be respected, for example? It's a very, very common one. And yet that, of course, is not a value. That is a driver. If it's expressed as a value, you would say, I need to respect others. I aspire to always respect others. But the need to be respected is more a driver that can hijack your attention when you notice that you're not being respected. And I'll tell you something else about this. It's easy to tell when a value. Well, let me ask you this question. Anybody like to answer the question? Is it possible for somebody else to violate your values the way that we have defined them? Is it possible for somebody else to violate your values the way that we have defined them here? So, Frederick, you're shaking your head. Dariano, I can see you shaking your head.
No, I'm not sure I got your, I'm not sure I understood properly your question, but for me, my values are my values.
Right. So nobody else can violate your values?
No, I can feel offensed or, but it's like my freedom of thinking. For me, okay. the way I understand it, I'm not sure.
All right. So how about a driver? So if you have a driver, and you may say that you have a value of respect, and many people do. And my question to people when they have the value, when they tell me that they have a value of respect, is this question. I would ask, okay, and then how can you bring respect into a situation where you are not being respected? It's the same with kindness. So quite often people will share that kindness is one of their top 5 values, in which case the classic question would be, and how do you bring kindness to somebody who is not bringing kindness to you? Because needing kindness is a driver, whereas bringing kindness is a value. And values are, nobody can violate a value except who?
Yourself.
Except you. So here it goes. If you violate your own values by acting in a way that is out of line with your values, then it's a sort of a sense of heaviness, kind of a sense of I'm not doing very well. If a driver is violated, for example, if you need respect and you're not being respected, then it feels like a kick in the chest, like a bomb going off in your body. And so the way that you know whether this is a driver that may be being driven by fake news and therefore is worthy of challenge, or whether it's a value, is how it feels. If it feels like a kick in the chest, like a rush of anger or frustration or fear is coming over you, then you want to have a look at it. And there are ways that we'll be showing you to be able to do that, because it's quite likely that it's not a value at all. It's something that you need from the world, and if you're telling yourself stories about what you need from the world, then there's a fairly good chance that they may not be right. All right. So let me ask you this question, and I think we've already kind of had a little bit of an answer to this. Given what I've just said about drivers and values, how might drivers dress up as values? How might drivers masquerade as or dress up as values, and how do we confuse them? And what is the impact on us and also on others when we do make that confusion between a driver and a value? And we hear it all the time. This goes against my values. If anybody says that, then they're confusing a value with a driver as we would define it. There's no absolute definition of this. And again, I just point to you that this is a skillful way of looking at values. It's not an absolute way of looking at values. And a lot of people will argue with this. But those people that are arguing with this are not taking any action that moves towards what they care about, or they may not be. Right. So what do you think?
So
how might we confuse?
So
Cyril.
Cyril here,
Cyril.
yes. Yeah, I think I really love the way that you are looking at this. For example, the question of the kindness, that how might you bring kindness into this situation? So what comes clear to me is almost like this self-centeredness versus thinking about the community and other people around me. Like, am I looking at stuff from my egoistic perspective, of my self-centered perspective, of do I have a capability to look at, the community, for example? Right.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think that is exactly kind of what we would say about that, is that if you, that profound happiness can arise when we attend to how we can pour out. The expression I sometimes use is, how can you pour yourself into this context in a way that is conducive to your own and others' genuine happiness and success for the system? Because what a driver is doing is it's screaming at you about it's telling you a story about what needs to happen right here, right now, in order for you to remove this feeling that occurs when your driver has been violated. It's not comfortable, and we resist it and we don't like it. And that resistance pops us up into the autopilot of our coping strategies of dealing with that discomfort in the body. And that will drive us to behave in ways that may be less than skillful. And quite often what we need to do is to just attend to, what is it that I can do? Right? What does my best self look like in this moment is often how I like to look at it. And that best self is a self that is acting in accordance with skillfully determined values. So thank you for that. And just on that, just a brief sort of extension of this, and we've already sort of touched on this. Not all values are created equally. All right. So the way that we look at this is we kind of create this, we call it values pyramid or values iceberg, where at the top of it are the things that you might be looking to have in your life. That many people do confuse these things, as I mentioned, with values. Many of these things up here are often said by people when asked the question, what are your core values? And they will come up with things like family, wealth, recognition, respect, stability, pleasure, accomplishment, loyalty, efficiency, and many other things when asked for their values. You would have seen those things actually on those lists that I described earlier on. But these are outcomes, and like all outcomes, we can't influence them directly, right? So if we attach to these as being our values, well, what does it really even mean? What does it mean to say that your family is a value to you? Of course, we all love our families, but that's not quite the same as that which we're talking about here. Maybe we love wealth, maybe we love recognition, but that doesn't necessarily help us unless we can pour ourselves into our life in a way that serves those things, isn't it? In other words, we can take action moment by moment by moment that actually makes these things more likely to happen, right? So that's the outcome side of it. And then beneath that, we have some what we call secondary values. And I'll tell you in a moment why we call them secondary values. They are values, and they are genuinely values. So these are ways that people could behave that might lead to outcomes. So showing up with courage, showing up by respecting others, being resilient, being altruistic, peaceful. So all of these things we would say are genuine values and are capable of leading to what we call valued outcomes. So for example, if family is a value, then the question we would be asking is, so if family is of value, we would like to have that clarified a little bit. And we would want to ask what values, because we would obviously point them in the direction of seeing family as an outcome rather than as a value, or as just a noun or an object, if you wish, rather than a value. And we would say, family is important to you. Then what values would you like to bring to your family situation, to your role as a family member? What values would you like to bring to that role? And then some other words would come out which might point more towards what we would describe as skillful values. So like support or love or kindness or compassion or mentoring stroke role modeling or whatever it might be, that would be truly the values that would underpin that. Now, the reason why we call these secondary is because we say that you can't go to them directly. You can train these values either, well, you might be able to go to them directly. Sorry, that's not quite right. You might be able to go to them directly. But let me ask you this question. What is it that is, if you do not feel courageous, let's say courage is a value for you, but you don't feel courageous, right? What is necessary in the moment when you're feeling scared and you would love to be able to bring courage to that moment? What are the things that are necessary so that courage might be able to arise in that moment? It's a question for you. Who would like to have a go at it? Because we can all say that we would love to be courageous or that we have courage as a value. But what is it that actually underpins courage? What is necessary for courage to occur? Dariana, I can see you really want to say something. I can feel it.
Yeah. I was thinking to resilience. Being able to be flexible, to accept the change will give us courage to face challenges or changes.
Fantastic. So you said that we may need to be resilient. And we might say that resilience is potentially also a secondary value that requires other sort of mental qualities or strategies to arise. You mentioned acceptance, which we would think is probably something at the elemental level that we might need to be able to do. Because acceptance means that we need to feel the fear, isn't it? So, I mean, courage by definition, I think, means that you're able to take action in the face of fear. Right? It doesn't mean that you're not scared of anything. That's just stupidity, right? It does mean that you can feel the fear and work through it and take the appropriate action anyway. Well, that means you might need to manage your fake news. But the first thing that needs to happen, isn't it, is that you need to notice that you're afraid. And what does that require? The noticing of fear. What's needed for that?
I mean, it takes presence, Tony. Presence,
thank you, Manoj. Presence. So presence is required, and we can cultivate presence through, Manoj, how do we cultivate presence?
Doing a course with you on the mindfulness.
Something like that, yeah. So mindfulness practice is a good way to cultivate presence. It may not be the only way, but it's certainly a very, very reliable way to cultivate presence so that we can become aware of what's going on in our bodies when we are experiencing fear. So yeah, what else apart from just only presence is necessary?
Patience.
So patience, perfect. Because patience means that we need to be able to sit with that fear for a few moments while we do certain other things. I'm noticing I'm scared. Oh, that's interesting. And then asking, so what's happening with me right now? What's the storyline that is running my mind right now? What story is running me in this moment? And is it true? And that's curiosity, right? You can see all these things down at the bottom here. Curiosity is the ability to maybe challenge the storylines that might be running my mind that are causing me to be afraid right now. And maybe I can trust that storyline, there's trust there, you see. I might be able to trust that storyline, well, maybe it's not true. Or, and it's trying to protect me from something that is in fact less dangerous than the consequences of following that story again and again and again. So believing this story and acting in its service again and again and again is actually more dangerous than experimenting perhaps with letting it go and doing something else instead. All right, so that's kind of how these things work. And all of these things down at the bottom, we can cultivate directly through various practices. We call them mental strategies or mental qualities. and we can cultivate them directly. And then when we do, it is more easy for us to bring our secondary values into life, even though we may feel that they're leaking away in particular moments. Any questions on that? And we'll move on. So let me see, where are we with time? 8:23. And we're finishing at 9:30, is that correct? No?
45, 8:45.
Oh, 8:45, oops. I was joking, by the way. Okay, 8:45, I'll try. So what we do in order to, if you wish, discover values and look at them in a way that where we can actually begin to embody them or begin to live them, what we say is that values need to become well-formed. And so we have this method that we like to teach, which is called well-formed values. And we say that well-formed values need to be crisp. So crisp means that they sit within a context or a role. So it might be that I have a role as a family member, and I would like this particular value to apply to that particular role. Or it might be that I have a role as a parent, and I would like the context to be in that role when I'm pissed off because my son keeps coming home late, even though I tell him not to. How am I going to, what values would I like to bring into that particular context? So that's what we mean by context stroke role. Resources is, what is needed for that value to live within me at that time. Impact, which is all about what is it like when I'm able to embody that value. Specific, obviously, is having it measurable in a way that we know when we're doing it. And possibly is really just, is it actually, am I being deluded? Is this really who I am? Or am I just deluded? It's just not going to happen for me. So that's what we call the crisp process around well-formed values. So the way that this works, just to give it a bit more specificity, our values, they might be general, i.e. just, really big picture. How do I want to show up in my life? Or I love the way Stephen Hayes actually talks about this is how, excuse me, what do I want my life to actually be about, right? So there is that, or we can wind it in and narrow it down. How would I love to be as a parent, as a spouse, as a friend, as a co-worker, as an enemy? How would I like to be, in that situation? And I say enemy actually slightly tongue in cheek, because the idea is to be able to reframe, those relationships and, bring our core values even to relationships that are difficult and see what happens. It's amazing how when we focus on bringing ourselves, because when we're having difficult relationships with people, we're often attending to our drivers and the way that we want them to show up with us, rather than our values, which is the way that we would love to be able to show up with them. And as a little nugget on that, ask yourself this question regularly, okay? And it's important. What is it that you need from others in order to be in order that you can be at your best? What is it that you need from others in order that you can be at your best? And I'm wondering, we're not going to do this, but you'll find that it's things like respect from others that you can be at your best, being listened to by others, being just considered by others, empathy from others, being understood by others. You'll find that it's all of those things that bring you to be at your best when you're noticing that others are like that around you. And given that, know that other people need that from you as well in order to be at their best around you. Right? Just being listened to, being respected, being treated with kindness, being treated with fairness brings people around you to be at their best, so that they are not being infected by their drivers while they're in relationship with you. Okay, so specific, or it might be even more specific than that. All right, context specific. How would I love to, so instead of how would I love to show up as a parent, more context specific, how would I love to show up as a parent when my son and or daughter is playing up? Okay, and it's lovely if the values that you would like to bring can actually link to the outcomes. It's good to visualize the link between the values and what these values might lead to. if I show up like this again and again and again in my life, even when things are difficult, where might it lead is the question to be asking yourself, and if you're in coaching, asking your clients. Okay. So what I wanted to do here, and I don't know if we're going to have time to do this, but I want you to just really start off by choosing an important role, something that you aspire, an important role that you aspire to play in your life. And then asking yourself the question, what is it that you most care about most in that role? So this is a starting point for the process. And I think we're probably not going to have time to run through this process. So what I'll do is I'll show you the process. And if you'd like to talk to me about it offline, I'll be more than happy to share it with you. So the starting point for this would be an investigation by you of what might be an important role in your life. And we can maybe try to do this on a poll and see if it works. So let me see, I'll set the poll up and I'll launch it. Well, now I've got the results being shared, so I don't know what's going on from that previous poll. They're now there. So life domains, here we go. So just what I'd like you to do, I think choose up to 3 important roles that you either play or that you would love to play in your life, and just slam them into the system. And we can perhaps do a little bit of work with that when we've got the answers. All right. So just quickly, I'll leave it another 15 seconds. 3 roles that you either play or you would love to play that are the most important for your life. I can't see anything happening here. 0% have voted according to me.
I did vote. Sure. So
yeah.
Maybe
yeah.
a few seconds.
3, 2, 1, and end. And I'm going to share the results. And who would like to read out the results? What's the top one here? Can anybody see?
Marriage life partner, 60%.
60% marriage life partner. Okay, that's pretty amazing.
And then,
what about parenting? Where's that?
Also 60%.
Okay.
And then professional career, 60%.
Okay, brilliant. All right, so let's choose the parenting one. Let's choose the parenting one. And so for those of you that are parents, then it'll be easy for you to answer this. For those of you that are not parents, you still may be able to answer this, okay? You still should be able to contemplate this. So what I'd like you to do now is going back to your screen. Can you see, and if maybe you could just refresh it. and see if you could input your most important values. Hello.
Perfect.
All right. So we're having a significant technology challenge, it seems. Hello. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to log off and rejoin and see what happens. Okay.
I have to say that the previous screen looks like an impressionist painting. So.
Hi, Tony. Now.
I'm not even able to log out.
Your voice very, very clear now. You're also very clear.
Okay. So okay, so can you hear me? Because I'm now logging in through my iPad while I'm waiting for my computer to restart. So can you all hear me?
Can hear you here, but I can't see the group.
Can't see the group.
I can hear you, Tony. I switched my video off if it can help.
Okay, very good. All right, so what I was going to do, which we're not going to be able to do, is I was going to ask you to reflect on what might be the key values for you in that role as a parent. So I'm wondering if it might be possible for you to maybe go into the chat window and just put in what might be some of these core values that relate to you in that particular role. And while you're doing that, while you're doing that, I'll try to get myself re-logged in. So just putting into the system, into the chat window, what might be some ways that you would love to show up in your role as a parent. Patience, growth attitude, growth mindset, having a positive attitude came in. Somebody else wrote trust and acceptance into the chat window. Compassion is coming in, empowerment, love. So it's interesting. All of these are quite positive. Having an open mind, right? That's another one that we would see very, very common when we ask people the question, what is it that they would love to bring to their role as a parent? All right. So just stopping that. I'd now like to ask you the question, so what is it that you actually do when your kids are acting up, playing up, acting out, not doing the things that you think are appropriate, being disrespectful to you, maybe not doing what you want, slurping their food, slurping their drink, where not using chopsticks properly, whatever it might be. What is it that you notice about how you actually show up in those situations? If you'd like to write something in. So reacting, projecting, very, very common. Now, and I can't show you my slides, unfortunately. So we're going to have to go with a slideless kind of ending to this. Making them wrong. So being able to remain open and showing them a better way to react. So Michelle said that she's disappointed or that she may be angry. And again, these things are the ways that we tend to show up. So the question is, how can the script process potentially help us to show up more skillfully? Okay, so that's what I want to focus just a little bit of time now. John mentioned using Dr. Gottman's 5-step emotional coaching process. Absolutely, including such things as using non-violent communication as a tool to help us to show up at our best in situations like this. Okay, so all right, so let's just have a look at some of the things that we might be able to do around this. And here we go. I'm trying to, I am multitasking here. I'm trying to log in. It looks like it's not going to work. Okay, so the first thing is that we would see if we can actually identify what it is that is the core value. So working value by value. The first step is to choose a value that you would love to be able to bring into that situation. And just bring your attention to these things. What is it that value actually is? How would you define it? What does it mean to you? And in particular, how will it show up from a behavioral perspective? Okay, so what does it look like behaviorally when you're able to kind of live inside that value? Okay, so that's kind of the step that really relates to the specificity of the value. Okay, what is happening behaviorally? What are you thinking? And also contemplate what are others doing, thinking, and feeling. All right, so all of that really helps you to be specific about it. The next thing, which is very, very important, is looking at the impact. So what is the impact of, or the benefit to you and to others of being able to bring this value alive? What might happen for you and for others if this value is actually expressed in that situation. Okay, and for this one, it's very, very useful to visualize the feelings, the ways that you yourself are actually going to feel if only you're able to bring this value into your life again and again and again. And generally speaking, what happens is we feel pretty joyful when we're going to be able to bring those values into our life. Okay, so there's that. So that's around impact and meaning, and this is all really about connecting with the benefits of being able to live that value. So the next one, looking excuse me, looking at the CRISP model, and again, we don't have to do these things in any particular order. So the idea is the next one, though, it's useful to look at resources, right? So around resources is, what is it that can help you to bring this value to be alive within you at that time? What mental factors can help you to bring this value alive in you? So such things as, presence, the ability just to stop and pause and take a couple of breaths might be a mental factor that might help you. What emotions, what moods might support you? What's going on in the mental autopilot that might help you to be able to bring this value into your life? And also what might interfere with it, okay? Skills, knowledge, and experience is the second component of resources. What is it around skills, knowledge, and experience might you need to remember, to bring back to mind? For example, John mentioned Dr. Gottman's 5-step emotional coaching process. Other people use the techniques of speech acts or nonviolent communication or no-fault conflict. So there are lots of things that we might learn to do that go missing in action when we've been hijacked by a driver. Okay, so how can we bring those things back online? People, okay, so who might be able to help us? We might want to go and quickly talk it out with somebody else to get alternative perspectives and give us the time and space to reframe our thinking on that. What about environmental factors? Do we want to go for a walk, get a bit of fresh air? Go out take the dog for a walk, go out into nature, maybe have a shower or whatever, just to give ourselves a little bit of time. These things are potentially resources for us. Okay, so what are the resources that can support us? And on the other side of things, what is it that might get in the way? So it's the same thing here: mental factors, skills, knowledge, and experience that we don't have, that if we would like to be able to live this value again and again and again, it might be that we need to go and acquire these skills, the skills, knowledge, and experience to be able to do that. Right? We might need to learn some techniques of Dr. Gottman's NVC methodology, or we might want to learn other things that can support us. Right? So there's that. All right. So just finally, as we begin to wrap up on this, I'm actually going to try, I think, to get back into Zoom and see what happens here. All right. We've got a couple of minutes left, and if I'm very, very lucky, I'll be able to log back into Zoom. No, maybe not. I'm actually suffering, it seems, from a hardware problem rather than a software problem. It's not an internet problem. It's more of a problem actually with my equipment, and that is extremely disconcerting. Okay. All right, well, let's just talk briefly about leakage while this is trying to fire up. So what we mean by leakage are situations where we know that we would love to be able to embody a particular value, but it's kind of leaking away. And instead, we're paying more attention to these kind of subconscious drivers and we're getting hijacked. So, for example, we're blaming people, we're making them wrong, or we're trying to be clever or being sarcastic, much of which is really not showing up at our best in service of the development and the growth of other members, let's say, of our family or anybody else around us. So how can we deal with leakage? And the way to do this is to contemplate the following things. Ask yourself this question. How can you bring the value back online? What other values are related to this role that you might need to be able to remember? So, for example, if your kids have come back late and you want to shout at them, you may have another value which maybe deals with being in relationship with your kids or being a role model for your kids. And maybe you don't want your kids to show up as a sort of a person who just gets angry when things are not going their way. So maybe you can just remember some of these other values and use them to reset the compass. You might say, yes, my driver is taking me in this direction, but I'm going to violate 5 or 6 of my core values related to my relationship with my kids if I act like this. I'm going to violate these values myself. So how about I just take a pause and reflect? So that's the first question. What other values related to the role might I be able to bring to help me to come back online? Okay, so the second question I might ask is, so what other values related to other areas of my life might be useful to remember? Maybe I want to have the courage to just withhold my opinion. It's amazing how sometimes just withholding opinion and showing up and just showing up quietly and not doing anything can sometimes be more courageous than actually taking action. So in the Tao philosophy, they talk about the philosophy of Wu Wei. I think Michelle would probably pronounce it better than me. And Wu Wei, as far as I know, means active non-action. And sometimes to take no action requires more courage than to actually take action. All right, so there's that. So what other resources? So we've got other values related to the role, we've got other values related to our life, and we have other resources, including our mental resources, the ability to take a pause and just do nothing and be patient and reflect. And maybe consider doing a mindfulness practice, or maybe consider talking it out with somebody else. Okay. And then finally, how about going back to practice those core mental cultivations? The ones that I like most are cultivating presence, cultivating patience, cultivating curiosity, which otherwise you might call beginner's mind. Acceptance, letting go, trust, kindness as a core value. And these are the things that you can bring to your mind just to help you to see things just that little bit differently so that your action may not be so off target. Okay. So just finishing off with the power of values. So values are extremely powerful when we commit to skillful actions that serve them, right? So remember that. So just telling ourselves that kindness is a core value for us, it's not enough. On the other hand, if we can commit to our valued actions, which are in line with that valued pathway, that the commitment to valued action is the golden key to our profound happiness and success. So I'd basically say, who wants some of that? Who wouldn't want some of that? Discovering values, making them specific, making them context and role specific, knowing what the resources are, making them impactful, and making sure that they're positive. If only we can do this, and it's not that difficult, we'll be able to remember to embody them again and again and again. Okay, so committing to actions is where the rubber actually meets the road on this. And remember this, that what you value in a particular moment is betrayed by your actions. Right? So visualize regularly and remind yourself over and over again, what is it that you really care about? And as you do that visualization, attend deeply, go beneath the stories that might be confounding the mind. And remember that the mind makes mistakes with this. So ask yourself what you care about, not just right now, but in the longer term, relative to the roles that you occupy or would like to occupy. Rehearse leakage strategies for when things go wrong.
And remember that happiness and all things that are good occur when we attend more about how we want to show up in our lives and what we want to bring to our lives in our roles and various contexts of our lives, and less to what we want to get from those contexts. Right? And what we want from, if we can show up in line with our values again and again and again, then what we want from our life will kind of look after itself. Why? Because we will be at our best again and again and again, despite the stuff that life might be throwing at us. All right. So that's really all I've got to say. And I don't have a slide really to wrap up. But I'm just wondering if there's anybody that would like to share any comments or questions from this little offering. Is anybody there even? Yeah, I can see that you're all still there, amazingly enough. And I'm really sorry about what happened with the technology. My computer is still completely frozen. I can't see anything. The screen's gone blank. So I'm now connected on my iPad. So that's why you're looking at the side of my face, because I'm still trying to see if I can get my screen to work, which it won't. So here was my chance to sort of stay within my values of, resilience is a value for me. So I'm hoping that I managed to put it off reasonably well. So who would like to say something about this?
I can say thank you first. That's always inspiring, Tony.
Who's
good
speaking?
To see you. Oh, Frederick, sorry.
Oh, hi, Frederick. Yeah, thank you so much for
Tony.
that.
Thank you. And I love your question, like, what do I need from others in order to let them, how do you say, let them me, anyway, at my best.
For you to be at your best. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the word rehearse, the idea of rehearsing, the idea of practice.
And it's so true that the mental rehearsal, people underrate the power and value of mental rehearsal or even visualization. There's, hold on one second while I pull out. Oh, I'm just going to do a little operation on myself. Oh, here it is. So I've just pulled out my brain. And here, when we do mental rehearsal, what we're doing is we're strengthening the circuitry of recognition and remembering. And there's a part of the brain here, just at the back and the sides, called the infraparietal junction. That is that part of the brain that holds, if you wish, short-term memory of how we want to show up. And the more that we rehearse the way that we want to show up, and pay attention to it with this part of our brain here, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the more we're actually strengthening that part of the brain to be attentive to the way that we want to show up. We're actually growing that structure, which makes it easier for us to attend to the things that are resonant in here. Sometimes it's called the cognitive circuit. The cognitive circuit is that part of the brain that informs us and reminds us of what's actually important to us. But we need to build that recognition circuitry. Okay, and we can do that by just doing, that's why coaching works so well. That's why having lists works so well, prioritized to-do lists. That's why clarifying your values in this way, carefully, writing them down, speaking them out, being coached through them, looking at what happened, looking at what you want to do when things go wrong, rehearsing strategies for how you want to show up when things go wrong. It strengthens that circuitry of remembering. So thank you very much for that, Frederick. It's a very, very good point. Mental rehearsal, it's a key part of this.
It's like a gym.
So Lamb, is that Stephanie? No. So somebody's asked, actually I can't read it, it's too small on my phone. May I ask if values will be forgotten or put aside in some situations? Somebody's asking. And the answer is, by default, yes. But there are some people that are always, that they won't forget how they want to show up. You will know some people that are sort of highly values centric in terms of the way that they show up in their lives moment by moment, and they can ride a steady path or sail a steady path through headwinds, and they don't get taken too far away from the track. And for such people, often you'll notice about some people that the more stress they're under, the more steady they are. Why? Because their stress and the way that they're feeling stress and their response to stress is to be more and more and more present. And the more present we are, the more we have space to remember what we really stand for and how we would like to show up. So I don't know if that answers that question, if that's okay as an answer for that. Okay. So there's a follow-up there. I have a religious background. I was told that everybody has inner values that we are born with. And the answer for that is it may well be true for many people. You know, there is a very, very strong overlap between people at a deeper level in terms of, and I'm going to put it like this, the causes and conditions for what we call genuine, sustainable long-term happiness. And that genuine, sustainable long-term happiness, if you look at just about all of the various spiritual traditions, you'll notice that there's a big overlap in terms of what they all regard as the causes and conditions for genuine happiness. Things like kindness, compassion, service, all a part of that. Being not acting in a way that causes suffering for self or others tends to be very deep. And this is part of our humanity. We are born with that. And there's been a lot of research done on toddlers around, you know, we're talking about 2-year-old kids and the extent to which by default they offer pro-social behaviour. And a lot of quite surprising things, that even 2-year-old kids are naturally helpful to others. So if they see their parent dropping something on the floor, then there's a pretty good chance if they notice that they're going to waddle over and pick it up and give it back to the parent. So it's interesting that, you know, even if you go to animals have similar. So if you look at troops of primates, monkeys, and you watch them, they spend quite a lot of their time picking fleas out of each other, right? And it turns out that the monkey who is doing the picking receives more well-being hormones in their brain, serotonin and other things like this, oxytocin. So the monkey who is doing the picking of the fleas receives a lot more happiness hormones than the monkey who is receiving the grooming. So you could infer from that, it's a bit of a stretch, but you might infer from that it is deeply wired into our biology to live lives of value, where those values are focused on what we're bringing and less focused on what we're getting from the world. Make sense? Anybody else? And then we'll wrap it up. We are a bit late. Thank you for that. Thanks for that feedback. All right, then. Well, I'm so sorry again about the technological crisis. I have no idea what happened there, but I hope, again, if you would like to engage, maybe Michelle or somebody can just put my email address in, or the email address of the company, just in case anybody would like to engage with us about anything. We would be more than happy to talk to you. And if you just want any, just please, no obligation at all. If you want any more information about anything related to this topic, we are more than happy to share it. All right. So on that note, I will say goodbye, and thank you very much for being here and for being so patient.
Thank you very much, Tony.
All right. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you so much, Tony. Take care.
Thank you, Tony.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Good night. Bye-bye.